Module 1, Nutrition. Minimalist methods to upgrade your energy, increase focus, and transform yourself using food. So what we're going to do is each week we're going to go through one of the 10 foundation modules, which are nutrition, physical activity or movement, stress management, sleep, supplements, hydration, oxygenation, light, mindset, and habits. And we're going to try to focus on the Pareto 20% that will produce 80% of your results. And rather than just dump everything that's in my brain into yours so you feel at the end like you just drank water through a fire hose and you don't even know where to start, we're going to try to keep it as simple as possible. I'm going to give you guys a look at what I'm eating, how I structure my meals, what's in my fridge, what's in my cabinets, what are some ways that you can hack your nutrition to make this easier on yourself. So for example, where we're trying to eat more wild-caught fish, I'll show you some ways that you could get ready to eat healthy canned wild-caught fish if you don't have time to get to the fish market or the supermarket or Whole Foods every week. And we'll show you some of those little tricks along the way that will make this a lot easier for you. And that's kind of how we'll do it. So if you're ready, let's jump in. Okay, so the first thing is it's not that hard. Eating clean for 28 days so that you can figure out what it feels like to be functioning at your best is not hard. Fighting cancer is hard. Overcoming hardcore drug and alcohol addiction is hard. Giving birth is hard. Avoiding gluten, dairy, booze for 28 days is not fucking hard. If you look at it like the average person spends 28,000 days on earth. We're talking about taking 28 of those, investing 28 days in yourself, 0.001% of your life to take everything to that next level. And the hard truth of the matter is most of the time when people are telling you these things are easy, they're simple, here's how you do it automatic, they're trying to sell you something. And rarely are they a living, breathing example of the results you're trying to achieve. There's a lot of armchair experts, and I'm not trash talking anyone. I'm just reflecting the state of the industry right now. The truth is that this stuff, it does take work. It takes consistent effort and focus. And for some of us, making that transition from being soft, mentally weak, seeking comfort to becoming mentally stronger, to putting ourselves in challenging situations, to actually seeking out discomfort every day in our workouts, using more weight, pushing for those extra reps, shortening rest periods, bringing that intensity, eating meals that we wouldn't normally choose, foods that maybe we think are gross or not necessarily something that appeals to us from a palatability perspective. But it's everything. It's really how you live your life. Are you internally focused on yourself, or are you saying hi to other people when you pass them in the street? When you leave your building, you say hi to your doorman, or do you hold eye contact with people a little bit longer and make those connections? Basically doing the things that you should, even when you don't want to. That's what all this comes down to, and that is, out of all the habits that we're going to discuss over the next 10 weeks, the most important habit is doing the things that you should, even when you don't want to. And it's a refusal to settle. It's a refusal to accept a life that is less than you are capable of living. And once that decision is made, and that can happen right now, it could happen tomorrow, it could happen a week from now. It's a little bit different for everyone, but everything transforms once you make the decision that never again will I accept a life that is less than I am capable of living. So, as I mentioned, the people who tell you it's easy, they're usually trying to sell you something, whether it's supplements, whether it's some of their programs, and they often haven't even done it themselves. So consider the source. Make sure you're not following false idols, gurus, armchair experts, keyboard quarterbacks, whatever. And the best way to go about this that I recommend is punctuated equilibrium. You go all in for a short period of time. Make this a priority in your life, because when something is a priority, it supersedes everything else. Now, I'm not telling you to neglect your family and things like that. You gotta keep the lights on. You gotta pay the bills. You gotta handle those responsibilities. But making this a priority and doing the things you need to do to take your health and your energy and your focus to the next level is what is required. Otherwise, life gets in the way. If you know that you need to work out and you don't do it early in the morning, when you come home from work, you're going to be tired, you're going to have family responsibilities, and it's not going to happen. So by following that punctuated equilibrium approach, you say, look, this isn't a forever thing. I'm going to bust my ass for the next 28 days. I'm going to get some insane results, and then I'm going to figure out how to maintain those results. And I'm just going to keep things there. I'm not going to backslide. And then when I'm ready to go back in, I go back in and I take it to the next level. And that's a very sustainable way of doing these things, because often we don't figure out what is required to maintain the results that we've just gotten for ourselves. And that's why a lot of people, have lost 100 pounds, but it's the same 10 pounds 10 times because they lose the weight and then they don't figure out how to maintain it. And then they lose the weight again and then they don't figure out how to maintain it. So the key is make the progress, punctuated equilibrium, then figure out how to maintain it. Figure out how you can seek that balance in your social life with occasionally having a drink if you like that. Occasionally having some cheap foods if there are things that you enjoy despite knowing that they're not necessarily going to optimize your energy and focus. And see what you can get away with without compromising the results that you've just gotten for yourself. Is that making sense? All right, cool. So essentially, all change happens outside of our comfort zone. And we need to seek that discomfort. We need to pursue situations that other people would quit if they were put in. And then similarly, we need to pursue situations that a version of yourself that existed a week ago or a month ago that you would have quit in. But as you evolve, you're able to stay in the pocket longer and you're able to push yourself and you're more comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's really where you get the results that you seek. Sweat the small stuff. There's a concept called the aggregation of marginal gains. And it essentially means that by making small 1% increases in a number of seemingly innocuous areas, each of those things comes together and it dramatically increases your performance over time. Darren Hardy talks about this in his book, The Compound Effect. And it's something that has been popularized recently because when we focus on constant improvement, there is an exponential increase that takes place in our performance, our energy, our focus, our health. Every area of our life begins to transform. And essentially, how we do anything is how we do everything. So it's not just do you bust ass in your workouts, but you slack off at work. Everything is interrelated and has to do with your sense of self, the standards that you hold for yourself, what you expect and accept for your life. So for many people, it's not a problem that they lack information. There's a lot of free information on the internet. Not all of it's good, but there's enough information out there to make some pretty big improvements in your energy if you're determined and you're willing to try a lot of things that don't necessarily work, as long as you keep pursuing that goal and you don't throw in the towel. But for many people, for many of us, it's a lack of standards problem. And this is something that I was guilty of too. For a long time, I kind of lived these like double lives where on one hand, I would be extremely healthy during the week and eating good, working out. But then on the weekends, I would drink to excess. I'd stay up till 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and just be a disaster the next day because I destroyed my body that night partying. And it's a matter of, it wasn't until I started holding myself to higher standards and saying, I can't spend 2/7 of the week feeling like I'm functioning at 10% capacity. I wanted to feel good all the time, and feeling good kind of became my higher purpose. A really cool example of this aggregation of marginal gains is Dave Brailsford from the British professional cycling team, Team Sky. They won the Tour de France this past year. He started implementing this this aggregation of marginal gains method by first optimizing his team's nutrition then their training, and then actually the ergonomics of their seats. But he started taking it beyond that. He started looking at like the pillows that they were using, and they started bringing their own pillows to the hotels when they traveled. Every area of their life, they were trying to find ways to just make 1% improvement, because they know when they totaled up all of those 1% improvements, it would make a big difference. And they set a goal that they wanted to win the Tour de France in 5 years. And after applying this method, they ended up winning it this past year in 2015 in just 3. So feeling good is your highest goal. Essentially, your body is smarter than any expert. If everyone on the internet's telling you that kale's good for you and you need to eat a whole bunch of kale, but every time you eat kale, you get digestive distress, gassy, you feel brain fog, kale probably isn't the best thing for you to be eating at this point in time based on the current status of your health. So use logic, trust the feedback that your body is giving you, because there are pros and cons to everything. And what a lot of people don't tell you is, let's go back to that kale example. There are many individuals that have thyroid disorders. Well, kale is a goitrogen, meaning it interferes with the thyroid's ability to absorb iodine, which is needed to produce thyroid hormones. So if you take someone that already has an underlying sluggish thyroid, or they're borderline hypothyroid, or they are hypothyroid, and then they eat excessive amounts of kale, where they're throwing it in their shakes, they're eating kale salads, they're steaming kale at night because they think kale is this perfect superfood, they could be actually doing more harm than good. So make sure to diversify your diet, understand that there's pros and cons to everything, and listen to your body. Don't ignore the signals. And adjust your strategy along the way based on the feedback that you're getting. I want to keep this simple, so I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to teach you everything that's in my head. I'm going to try to tell you what to do step by step, show you what's been working for me and many of my clients, and then we'll do a Q&A, and if this is something that makes sense for us to customize down the line, then we can explore that as well. You want to think of the fact that, like I said, sweat the small stuff. Every bite you eat is doing one of two things to you. It's either giving you more energy or it's giving you less energy. And it's that simple. There is no neutrality. And you want to focus on more foods. About 90% of what you eat, you want to be things that give you more energy. The 10% that doesn't necessarily give you more energy should be things that allow you to that make your program more sustainable, because you're integrating some foods that you really enjoy the way they taste, or maybe that includes some alcohol because you're out in social situations with friends, or you're at an event and they've got hors d'oeuvres and maybe you forgot to eat. But 90% of what you're eating should be foods that give you more energy. And you always want to be asking yourself, this comes back to that mindfulness, and we'll talk about it in stress management. But the purpose of mindfulness in a lot of this is to have that awareness of saying, is this food, is this meal, is this bite going to elicit the desired response that I want for myself? Is it going to move my life in the direction that I want to take it? And nothing happens until you commit. Really, you've got to commit if this is something you want. I'm not telling people this is something you have to do. We're here because you raised your hand and you said this is something I want for my life. But until you make it a priority and commit, nothing will happen. The type of results that you want will always elude you. It almost needs to become a short-term obsession and say, look, even if you're only going to be obsessed for a couple weeks, pour yourself into it. Pour every ounce of your energy, every faculty in your body into making this happen, into getting the most extreme, powerful results that you can in a short amount of time, and then maintain those results. Ease up, find that balance, and then go back in and make sure that you commit. So the rules for optimizing your nutrition. We'll go over some of the basics now, and we'll dig into some of the finer details throughout the presentation. And I'll try to pick things up so we're not here too long. You want to eat about 80% plants. Cellular carbohydrates, meaning if your carbs are coming from plants, those carbs are trapped in fibrous cell walls. They're not in the modern processed, overly refined foods that are acellular, more calorie dense, and cause many of the metabolic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, that are reaching epidemic levels today. As much as you can, you want to eat fresh, you want to eat local, and you want to eat seasonal. So some of the best ways to do that, when I say fresh, we're talking about if it's healthy animal protein, wild caught fish, whatever it is. How long ago was that? Did that animal give its life? Um, if it's when we're talking about local, is it from a farmer's market, or is this produce that was picked a month ago in Mexico, took 2 weeks to transport here, was irradiated at the border, then it got to the grocery store, it sat on the shelf for 2 weeks, then you pick it up and you eat it. That whole time there's a degradation of nutrients. The nutrients start leaving plants as soon as they're picked from the earth. And the more time that is elapsed between that plant being picked and you putting it in your body, the more nutritionally dilapidated that food becomes. And we kind of circumvent that by eating locally when possible. Unfortunately, a lot of places now we have more access than ever to local foods, local, organic, and seasonal. Eating foods where they're in season, because it also decreases the amount of time it takes for them to get to you. You want to eat living foods that are rich in their natural water content, and that's not just from a hydration perspective. It has to do with the structure of the water as well. So we're going to talk in the hydration module about structured water and how this water it not just has a different energetic charge and is different on a quantum level because of the way that its electrons are arranged, but it's assimilated completely different by our cells, and much differently than the water that comes through copper pipes and from our local municipality, which is essentially dead water because those pipes seal the electrons. And we'll get into all this in more detail. But when you're eating living foods that are rich in their natural water content, it's water that is more easily assimilated by our cells. So not all water is created equal either. Fresh, raw vegetables, and even fruits are also very high sources of glutathione, which is our body's master antioxidant. So that's a big part of the reason why, if your digestion is in a good state, you want to do lots of raw vegetables and some organic berries starting out, eventually organic fruits as well, if you don't have high blood sugar, insulin insensitivity, and metabolic issues. Yeah, about 20% is good quality proteins. Most of those proteins I recommend being wild caught seafood. So oysters, wild caught fish, crustaceans, foods that are high in DHA. So you've got your essential fatty acids, which are called that because we all need them. They're essential for our brain function, ocular function. All of our cells are made up of these healthy fats and lipids, and we need particularly DHA for our brains to work well. And the best way to do this is to focus your healthy proteins around wild caught seafood. The best being, if you can do oysters every week, especially if you're a guy, it's amazing for increasing your testosterone levels. And then wild caught fish. And I'll give you some easy ways to do that. So that it's a little bit less of an interruption to your daily life. Liberal use of healthy fats, seafood broths, bone broths, those are both great. They're rich in glycine, the amino acid that helps to heal intestinal permeability. So a lot of us, if you imagine healthy intestines, there's a smooth, thin intestinal lining that that helps to digest our foods. When we eat a lot of grains and gluten and anti-nutrients, these can cause holes in our intestines, which then allow undigested food particles to pass through. Those undigested food particles are seen as foreign invaders by our immune system. Our immune system then mounts an attack, which essentially causes this autoimmune reaction, inflammation within the body. It can cause pain, stiffness, chronic degenerative diseases. And seafood broths, bone broths, supplements like glutamine, the amino acid glutamine, all help to reverse intestinal permeability and to heal the gut lining. So that's why we want to incorporate them into our diet. Whole food probiotics, resistant starches, prebiotics, things that help to repopulate the gut, both by introducing good bacteria and by providing food for that good bacteria. Make sense? All right, nice. And quality over quantity. You want organic. Anytime I'm referring to foods, I'm referring, especially meats and wild caught fish, we're talking about organic, wild caught, pastured, grass fed, free range. Those are the words that you want to look for. That means animals that were raised on their natural diet. They were raised humanely, outdoors, in the sun, eating grass, eating foods that they would eat in the wild. The next best is, and you'll see this in a lot of restaurants now that are moving forward, is like, antibiotic free, hormone free. It's better than the food that comes from factory farms and concentrated animal feeding operations, but it's not as good as organic and wild caught and pastured and grass fed, etc. And similarly, cage free is better than conventional eggs, but not as good as free range pastured eggs or organic eggs. The 10,000 year rule, essentially, you want to eat food that's as close to the form that you'd find it in the wild 10,000 years ago. And you want to not recreate baked goods and treats and junk foods with allowed ingredients from the program. A lot of people will do that. I was talking to one of my clients, Ash, the other day, and he was super psyched because he was telling me this like laundry list of like banana breads and muffins and cakes that like him and his girlfriend had whipped up, and like I'm sure they were delicious. I wanted to eat all of them, but he's trying to aggressively lean out for summer and while increasing his energy. And I was like, dude, I got some bad news. Like that's, when you're going in for that 28-day period, you don't want to be eating a whole bunch of cakes and muffins, even if you've found a way to engineer them from allowed ingredients. Essentially, this is going to come down to intuitive feeding. A lot of people want to know how many times a day they should eat, and it's what's most important is not how many times you eat. It's eating foods that don't disrupt your endocrine system, which is a lot of the foods that we're going to be eliminating during these 28 days. And the most common immunogenic and allergenic foods, meaning the most common foods that can cause an autoimmune reaction in the body or an allergic reaction in the body, both of which trigger inflammation. And then the quantity that you eat. Calories do matter, and they don't matter as much for people that are eating junk, because that junk is screwing up their hormones. And just by switching to a more plant-based whole food diet, they're going to lose weight, just because they're not. It's almost physically impossible to eat the same amount of calories if you're eating a whole bunch of broccoli and kale and green vegetables. But that doesn't mean the calories don't matter. It just means you're eating a lot more high fiber, nutrient dense foods that are going to fill you up. It's a lot harder to get to 2,000 calories in broccoli than it is to get to 2,000 calories in cheeseburgers. So some strategies. I personally skip breakfast. I've tried a number of different ways to fast and integrate intermittent fasting into what I do. The most sustainable for me is skipping breakfast most days, and I basically I just eat when I get hungry. If I'm hungry early in the day, then I eat. I don't force myself to prolong that morning fast. And some days I'm not hungry till 4 or 5 p.m. So it's listening to your body and eventually making this intuitive. What I recommend when starting out is kind of like training wheels. You adopt like a 16-8, where you've got a 16-hour fasting window and an 8-hour feeding window. So for many people, that's still just skipping breakfast. You make lunch your first meal of the day. Say you eat lunch at noon, and then you can even have a snack or a mini meal mid-afternoon if you get hungry again. And then say you have dinner at 7 p.m. You're done eating by 8. You've eaten all of your food in a shorter time window, that 8-hour window, and then that leaves you 16 hours to detox. Because you can look at digestion and detoxification as like two opposing processes. When you're digesting, you're not detoxing. And by keeping our feeding windows smaller, it allows a bigger window for us to detox, and it makes it easier. It improves insulin sensitivity. For many people, it also results in improved body composition, so they're able to put on more lean muscle while leaning out. And then you can tweak from there. You can try an 18-6, where your feeding window is 6 hours, your fasting window is 18 hours. And I recommend doing a longer 24 to 36-hour fast once a week. Don't do it more than that, because it can be too much stress on your body. A lot of this is being aware of the aggregate effect of all of the stressors in your life. So If you're training really hard, that's going to be a stressor. Let's say you don't sleep enough because, we'll get to that in module 4, but let's say you're not sleeping a lot because you work a ton. That's going to be a stressor. All of these things accumulate and have an aggregate effect. If you're also going through 24-hour fasts 3 times a week, you could be overstressing your system and actually doing more harm than good, spiking your cortisol, your body's stress hormone, which can result in excess adipose tissue, particularly in the belly region. So just something you want to be aware of. And again, I usually wait until I get hungry, I eat, and then I try to make my last meal 3 hours before bed, because a number of research studies have found that when you eat right before bed, it can downregulate mitochondrial function. So your mitochondria are like the little bacteria-like organelles that are in your cells. You can look at them as like the energy powerhouses of your cells. They take oxygen and glycogen from the food we eat, and they manufacture ATP. When we eat right before bed, they've found that can decrease the effectiveness and efficiency of our mitochondria. So try to make that last meal 2 to 3 hours before bed, because as you'll see, a lot of this does tie into how effective and efficient are your mitochondria at producing energy. And what you don't eat is actually more important than what you do eat. Many people focus on uh, balancing out eating something bad with eating something good. The key is that a lot of these things, if you look at what's going on in most of us, we've got this systemic inflammation taking place from a bombardment of immunogenic and allergenic foods. And it's not until we stop pouring gasoline on the fire that we're able to figure out how we actually feel when we're at our best in the absence of these triggers. And it takes, for example, with gluten, it takes 21 days for gluten to get out of your system. 21 days. So most of these 28 days, you're just your body is still recovering from probably the last time that you consumed grains or gluten. And it's anytime like when we slip up, that resets. So you want to look at it as really being diligent about avoiding these triggers, at least for this short-term period. And then we can strategically reintroduce them one by one, and you'll have a better sense of how they affect you. Because we're all different. We all have different genes. We all have different health statuses, and we're all affected differently by foods. So the most important thing is avoiding the big five during these first 28 days. And really, your energy and your focus will be best when you're able to avoid these in the long term as well. Grains, which includes gluten, dairy, GMOs, the 3 most common of which are corn, soy, canola oil, and their derivatives, sugar, and alcohol. So one of my clients, Jim Boston, the first time Jim worked out with me, he'd never trained in his life. I think the most physical activity he'd ever been involved with was like Little League T-ball, and then that was pretty much it. And he decided at like 34 or 35, it was time for him to get in shape. And so we were starting with a clean slate. And what kept happening with Jim was kind of curious. Every Monday he would come in and he would just be a disaster. We'd work out and it was like we'd never trained together. It was like the first workout every time. And his first workout was we basically ran out of weights because he kept being like, we were on the chest press machine and he was like, I need less weight, man. I need less weight. So we kept moving the weight up, and then finally he's like, I need less weight. I'm like, Jim, we're on the last plate. There's only one plate. You're gonna be pushing air in a second. And it was like every Monday we would go back there, and then by Friday he'd be rocking. So he'd make progress during the week, but it was like, so I finally asked him. And I was like, Jim, what's going on the weekends? What are you doing? And he basically admitted he would eat pretty good for 5 days, and then he would go nuts and just binge on pizza and booze, and he wouldn't sleep. He'd be partying like crazy with his fiance, and you could see it. We'd be working out, and he would get pain from the knees down. His calves would lock up. He'd get that feeling where, like, have you ever been skiing and you feel like your boots are too tight, your feet are getting all hot, and almost like there's lack of circulation? Never, no. He would get some of that going on. And it had to do with the fact that he was having these immunogenic and allergenic reactions to the dairy and the gluten and the alcohol that he was taking in excess over the weekend. And once we got that dialed in, it was consistent progress. It was no longer lose 5 pounds, gain 3 back, or even gain 5 back. Um, and that was eventually what it took for him to drop 30 pounds. Here's kind of what we want to eat for the first 28 days. The foods you want to focus on: a ton of vegetables, like close to 80% vegetables. And I know that doesn't sound super sexy, but there's a lot of things you can do with vegetables, and I'll show you some ways to spice them up and give them a little bit more flavor. Some cooked, some raw. There are clients that come to me when they're starting out, they've got digestive issues, and the raw stuff doesn't work so well. Anytime they eat raw veggies, they're getting GI distress, bloating, constipation. So if that's going on, lightly cook them. Organic berries, starchy tubers, which are sweet potatoes, yams, squash. Down the line, we will integrate white potatoes and some of the nightshades and see how you respond to those. But at the beginning, focus on the sweet potatoes, yams, and squash. Wild caught fish and seafood, like we talked about: oysters, crustaceans, wild caught fish. Whole food probiotics like kimchi, cultured vegetables, healthy plant-based fats, coconut oil, MCT oil, which is you want the kind that is pure caprylic acids, the C8 form, which is the best the best medium chain triglyceride. Bone broth, fresh green vegetable juice, organ meats, vegan protein powders, and seeds. And that's kind of where you want to be for the first 28 days. Then, thereafter, we test and we add some of these other foods, which have been known to be problematic for some people, depending on their metabolism, their insulin sensitivity, underlying health issues, food allergies, and predispositions. And that is when we integrate. You want to do them one at a time as well. That's what really allows you to assess their effect on you. So you don't want to add multiple foods at the same time, because you won't know what's causing an increase or a degradation in energy. This is where we add in the grass-fed beef if you want. You don't have to. Like, you would ask me, hey, can I focus on just wild-caught seafood? And absolutely, your energy will probably be better because of that overall, especially if you strategically incorporate some organ meats here and there, or do some of the things that I'm going to show you later for how you can get some of those nutrients without feeling like you need to cook up liver every week. So it's where we integrate some of the healthy meats, organic fruits, organic sprouted lentils and beans, nuts and nut butters, grass-fed ghee and grass-fed butter, lard, tallow, and fat from healthy animals, pastured animals, hydrolyzed beef and collagen protein powders. You can incorporate whey protein powders from organic grass-fed cows. You want like a non-denatured bioactive whey. You want to look for those words. Some good brands are, I'll show you later on. Raw organic dairy from pastured cows. For some people, they can get away with that. It's very anabolic, but it can also be a common food allergen, even when it's in its raw, natural, whole food form. And to be clear, that's not organic dairy from the grocery store. We're talking about the kind that is non-pasteurized, non-homogenized, still has all of the enzymes and probiotics. Organic grains and nightshades. So what to drink? First 28 days: water, organic teas like green, yerba mate, pu'er, guayasa, coconut, almond, flax milk. You want to avoid like carrageenan and some of the other additives. So try to go organic. I do a lot of organic light coconut milk. Kombucha, GT's Enlightened Kombucha is great. It's available just about everywhere. And then thereafter, you can test organic black coffee and espresso. The reason we're not including organic black coffee and espresso at the beginning is because Cyrex Labs did something. It was a gluten cross-reactivity profile where they looked at the foods that mimic the effect of gluten on the body, and they profiled the top 20 or so foods, and the number one gluten cross-reactant was coffee. Also up there were many forms of dairy, many grains, chocolate. So that's the reason that a lot of those foods are not in the first 28 days, because you have people that are sensitive to gluten. They don't realize the effect that their morning coffee is having on their health, and how that is interfering with them taking things to a higher level. So you can get caffeine from green tea, white tea, yerba mate tea, pu'er, guayasa. Some people also do, I recommend ProLab Advanced Caffeine. They've got these caffeine capsules that are made from like white tea, green tea, guarana. You can bite one of those in half, bitten in half. It's 100 milligrams. You drink it with a bunch of water. It gives you a little bit of that lift that maybe you were relying on coffee for, but it doesn't give you the immunogenic and allergenic proteins in the coffee, which are the compounds that are problematic. All right, so we'd already talked about cellular and acellular carbohydrates. Essentially, cellular carbohydrates feed the good bacteria in our gut. This is a lot more than just calories in, calories out. It has to do with, so the Pima Indians uh, for centuries lived in an area of scarcity where food was hard to come by, and consequently developed a bacterial composition in their gut that allowed them to extract more calories from their food. But what happened was, over the past few decades, as these Pima Indians moved into more urban areas, they brought with them that same bacterial composition of their gut. But as soon as they started eating a lot of these acellular, processed, modern man-made foods, they blew up. And it became, there was this obesity epidemic with the Pima Indians. They were dying of high cholesterol, heart disease, cancer, and of course, seeing obesity at these rampant levels because of their bacterial composition. Similarly, we'll take clients that have had difficulty losing weight, and I'll put them on a protocol to help kind of reset their metabolism and clean out their gut and allow them to start with a clean slate, essentially. And after decades of not having any success losing weight, the weight just drops off. And we repopulate the gut. We make sure to feed them resistant starches, prebiotics, reintroduce the right types of good bacteria, and get them those vital cellular carbohydrates, and everything is copacetic. The amount of carbohydrates we should be eating, essentially, you want your carbohydrates to be in sync with your energy expenditure, and taking into account your carbohydrate tolerance. How do you feel after you eat carbs? Most people, when they start paying attention to it, will find that they experience a drop in energy and an increase in brain fog and a little bit of lethargy when they take in too many carbs. So find that sweet spot where you are maintaining hormonal health and you're keeping your sex drive up, which actually pertains more to the fats for many guys and women, getting the right types of healthy fats. But a good starting place is, for guys, start with around 65 to 100 total grams of carbohydrates per day, and then adjust from there based on your activity levels, based on how you feel. Women, 50 to 75 grams. Most of those carbs coming from vegetables, non-starchy, some cooked, some raw. And then here's a chart that shows where your percentage of macros should be, your net carbohydrates and your protein, based on your goals. So you adjust all of those, whether your objective is therapeutic ketosis, diabetes and nutritional ketosis, where you want to be if you're metabolically healthy, where you want to be for fat loss, if you're eating for nutrient density, and then you can see all the way up at the top where net carbohydrates are 50%. That's where the typical Western diet. That's where most people are at. So you can see it's a far cry from the sweet spot where you want to be with all of these other scenarios. So some good fats. These are some of the best sources of fats to use. Red palm oil, Perillo-Captri, which is that C8 MCT oil, Carrington Farms raw, unrefined, cold pressed, organic coconut oil, Kerrygold grass-fed butter, or really any grass-fed butter, organic extra virgin olive oil, organic chia seeds. I like throwing those in the shake. Udo's 369 oil blend, avocados, those sorts of things. Some of the problems with the paleo diet, it's too much protein. You look at a lot of, there was a real popular infographic that came out a while ago that said it's not that hard, people, and it showed a plate and it had the plate divided in half, and it was like half meat and half vegetables. What we're seeing is a lot of people, that's way too much meat, and especially when you combine that with the fact that there are digestive issues at epidemic levels, hypochlorhydria, where people aren't producing enough stomach acid to break down these large quantities of meat. Not to mention the fact that many meats are inflammatory, particularly when combined with a gut microbiota that responds by producing more of these inflammatory cytokines and compounds when they're exposed to high amounts of animal fat. So it's usually good to go with a template that looks a little bit more like this: about 80% plants, 20% protein, most of that protein coming from wild caught fish, like we talked about. And it is important to note that vegetable protein is not equal to animal protein. Um, there's a big difference between complete and incomplete proteins. With animal proteins, organ meats, wild caught fish, you're getting all of the essential amino acids, where with many vegetable proteins, you're not. You're getting an incomplete amino acid profile. There's also been some studies that showed the correlation between protein consumption and risk of fracture. Just as one example, um, the individuals that consumed the highest amounts of animal protein had a 4.5 lower risk of fracture. The people that consumed vegetable protein had 2.9 times increased risk of fracture. So there are some differences, and that's why it's important. And that's just one example, but that's why it's important to diversify and not include only animal proteins or only vegetable proteins. You want both. There are benefits to both. Daily meal template. Make one of your meals a fat loss accelerator shake, a liquid meal that also lowers your digestive burden, improves detoxification. Make one meal a huge salad, like a family size salad, with a healthy protein, and I'll show you some examples. The healthy protein is also optional. A lot of times I'll just backload my animal protein and go most of the day eating vegan, vegetarian style, and then I eat protein based on when I'm craving it. And if my body is telling me, hey, I want some free range chicken, I'll cook up some free range chicken thighs in a little bit of coconut oil or extra virgin olive oil, and I'll have that, and I'm good. And that's when you start getting into more of the intuitive eating and giving your body what it needs. When your judgment is not as clouded with these hormonal imbalances and signals that can cause us to misinterpret things. Whereas maybe if people that have digestive issues or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, they may misinterpret carbohydrate cravings as I need carbs, whereas it's really the fact that they've got an overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria in their gut that are releasing chemicals that cause us to crave those foods. And it's actually a survival mechanism that they've developed to get us to feed them and allowed them to adapt over millions of years. So a shake, a huge salad, healthy protein optional, and then you're only cooking one meal a day. And for many people, you don't need to even cook that one meal a day. You can cook once every 3 days and just cook a huge batch of stuff. All right, so ingredients for the fat loss accelerator shake. And you guys will have these slides, so you can dig into it in more detail. This I pulled from one of my older programs, but nonetheless, the information is still relevant. You've got your protein powders. I use some different protein powders now. If you want to stay updated with what I'm using right now, you can go to biohackerprotein.com, I think is the URL. But here's some suggestions. During the first 28 days, I don't recommend starting with any of the whey options. Even the grass-fed, organic, non-denatured ones. Stay away from the whey. It's still dairy. You can reintroduce after the 28 days and see how you respond. I recommend adding some organic greens. Again, if putting the raw organic greens in your shake gives you digestive issues, cook your vegetables for now and let your digestion strengthen. We'll get you some digestive enzymes to strengthen that, and then you can revisit in the future as your body heals. You can do half of an avocado, extra virgin coconut oil, C8, Perillo Captri, bulletproof brain octane, some of those healthy fats. So 3/4 to a cup or even a can of organic unsweetened almond milk, flax milk, coconut milk. If you need to sweeten it up, you can do some organic stevia, ice cubes, all those things. Chia seeds as healthy fats. Some people even do the after the 28 days, you can throw in some pastured egg yolks as another source of healthy fat. Actually, make it taste pretty good as long as you're not sensitive to eggs. And Saigon cinnamon, which is a superfood, improves insulin sensitivity, has a number of beneficial downstream biological reactions. Even been shown to cure like bad breath. So putting like as little as a teaspoon in your shake can have a lot of health benefits too. And we go over more of that in different recipes and stuff with one-on-one clients, but that's a good starting place. You can also add green tea powder if you want. I use a BlendTech blender. If I was going to do it over, I'd probably buy a Vitamix. But really, any blender that's strong enough to chop ice and frozen berries works. I don't recommend using like the small magic bullets, NutriBullets, because they're just not big enough to get all of those ingredients in there. A lot of times I'm drinking a full pitcher of shake, and so it's a lot. You're making like a liquid meal. I already mentioned, if you want to check out what vegan protein powder I'm using right now and with a lot of clients, you just go to biohackerprotein.com and you can check that out. Okay, so an example of that covered the shake. The huge salad. Here's a picture I took, I don't know, a couple days ago of my salad. It's a huge family size dinner bowl. I've got, I don't know, in there some sort of organic spring mix or some sort of salad mix. I diversify. I use a lot of different things so that it's not just always going to kale or spinach or, lots of different plants. I like to put on extra virgin olive oil, Bragg organic apple cider vinegar, pink Himalayan sea salt, Bragg organic sprinkle, or I really like Bragg sea kelp delight. Season it up a little bit. A lot of people wonder why their salads never taste as good as the salads at the restaurants. And what I learned was that restaurants salt their salads. And a lot of people don't realize that. So you put a little pink Himalayan sea salt on your salad, it will taste a lot better. Throw in some of those Bragg seasonings like the organic sprinkle or the sea kelp delight. Not bad. There's some Wild Planet wild caught sardines and extra virgin olive oil. Sounds disgusting, I know. They're actually good. They taste pretty good. Most people that give them a try are like, wow, I thought this was going to make me want to vomit, but they're not bad. And it's very convenient. You just grab one of those, rip it open, and you can see how long does that take to prepare? Maybe 3 minutes tops. And then dinner, your cooked meals look something like this. Mostly plants, a little bit of wild-caught salmon, getting your healthy omega-3s, DHA, resistant starches and prebiotics, things that feed the good bacteria in your gut, plantains, yucca, cassava, refrigerated white potatoes, white rice. So when you refrigerate those forms of carbohydrates, if you reintroduce them and you found that you tolerate them, once you put them in the refrigerator, let them sit overnight, the next day they're a great form of resistant starch. Bob's Red Mill unmodified potato starch, you can put that in your shakes. Similarly, Clear Labs Biotigen, Natural Stacks Prebiotic, Prebiotin, all of those are prebiotic fibers that you can put a scoop or two in your shakes. Feeds the good bacteria, helps to repopulate your gut. The probiotics, contrary to popular belief, they don't really repopulate your gut. They do have immunomodulatory benefits, and they decrease inflammation, but it's really feeding the good bacteria that allows them to repopulate your gut. And you do that through resistant starches and prebiotics. And I also cycle my probiotics, different dosages, different days. Some days I won't take it. Some days I'll take a really high dose. Some days I'll take a really low dose. I keep it randomized so that my body is constantly adapting. So we got a shopping list. I don't want to go into this too much, but we have it here for you guys. We'll get everybody this as a resource, and you can just print it out and bring it to the grocery store with you. It'll make things a lot simpler. That's why I included it. So we've got your shopping list for the first 28 days. Thereafter, test and add. So we've got your vegetables, and I go through and list a whole bunch of them. Hopefully this makes it easier for you guys. And you can just print that up. Got your organic berries, starchy tubers, wild caught fish and seafood. These Crown Prince naturally smoked oysters are great. Like it's not easy for me to get access to fresh wild caught oysters. So a lot of times I always have these naturally the Crown Prince oysters on hand. I've got the wild caught sardines on hand. I've got the wild Alaskan sockeye salmon on hand. And when I can get the fresh stuff, I do. It's better than not eating it at all. And you can supplement with extra virgin cod liver oil. I like the Rosetta's Real Foods brand. And we'll go into more of those things in the supplements category. Whole food probiotics. In this one, you want to ignore the plain full-fat Greek yogurt and things like that because we can play around with reintroducing down the line, but almost everyone is going to have more energy without those foods. You can get whole food probiotics without that. That's just something that we found after 4 years of tinkering with the original program with clients and seeing what really works and what doesn't. I didn't want to deal with copying and pasting each one individually. Healthy plant-based fats, as we mentioned, covered those already. Bone broths and organ meats. Grasslandbeef.com, U.S. Wellness Meats, awesome online site that delivers frozen, healthy, pastured bone broths, meats, cheeses, even to your front door. There in the top left, you'll see Brunschweiger. That's my preferred way to get liver and organ meats. It actually tastes decent. The rest of them, I've tried liver a dozen times, and I want to gag every time. It's not happening. I also have taken some of the desiccated liver products, like the two that you see below in the middle, and both of those come from Argentinian cows that are grass-fed, humanely raised, so you don't have to worry about hormones, antibiotics, or any of that stuff. And then there's things like pate, beef gelatin, and collagen protein. Vegetable juice. If you do buy the store-bought stuff, you want it to be organic so that you're not drinking concentrated pesticides without some of the fibers that can inhibit their absorption. So there's a place called High Vibe by Me that makes this awesome G8 green juice. It's just nothing but green vegetable juices, all organic, and it's fantastic. I have a Breville juicer like the one on the left. I don't use it that much because it's a pain in the ass to clean. But Breville juicers are great. Champion juicers are great, especially as a tool for people with digestive issues that maybe don't do that well with raw veggies. Vegan protein powders. There's some of the ones that I use a lot with clients. There's a number of others, and we go into that in some of the other programs and one-on-one stuff, but these are all decent starting places. Healthy meats. So after the 28 days, integrating some of these different types of foods. Again, you want to look for the buzzwords: organic, free range, pastured, wild caught, all of that. You can print this. And then you can also integrate more fruits and starchy tubers. I just combine them here, being that they are insulinogenic carbohydrates, insulinogenic cellular carbohydrates. And find what is your carbohydrate tolerance, because everyone is a little bit different. And it changes over time too, based on your physical activity levels and your health status. Organic beans. There's a number of brands. The True Roots brand they make an excellent line of organic sprouted beans. I recommend starting with lentils, and then if those are well tolerated, going from there. Something really cool that I was introduced to recently by a client are these like bean spaghetti products. It's made with organic beans and water. That's it. But you can make pasta dishes with it, and they're amazing. So one of my clients invited me over. She made one with the organic black bean spaghetti, some fresh organic tomato sauce. It was amazing. What else? Organic grains you can test: organic quinoa, millet, gluten-free rolled oats, organic jasmine rice, brown and white. Usually, if people do better with the organic brown because it's a little bit lower GI, glycemic index. Let's see. Again, it depends on what your training is and your genes and all that stuff. We already mentioned here's some more healthy fats that you can introduce. You can get away with incorporating some more animal fat after the 28 days, whereas I recommend starting out with more plant-based fats for the first 28 days. There, we got a picture showing some of the differences between the grain-fed, factory-farmed eggs versus the pastured organic eggs. They're more nutrient-dense. They've got a different color, different taste. It's really completely different foods when you're talking about the factory farm meats versus the meat that comes from animals raised on their natural diet. Nuts and seeds. There's your sun butter that we were talking about. Go Raw brand. They make sprouted pumpkin seeds, sprouted sunflower seeds. Both of those are good. Some people, if individuals are dealing with pain and inflammation, whether that's joint pain or whatever, staying away from nuts and nut butters, or at least reintroducing them and seeing if you notice an increase in pain, inflammation, stiffness, aches. It's something that I recommend. And then here are some of those beef and collagen protein powders. If you want to test uh, organic whey, non-denatured whey protein, you can try the organic Warrior Whey, and see how you respond. Whey protein is a good it's a good whole food way to boost glutathione, but it makes a lot of people tired and they just don't tolerate it well. So test, see for yourself if you like. And then we talked about raw organic dairy from pastured cows. I so I'd played around with it for a little bit. I found it very anabolic. I packed on a ton of muscle in a very short amount of time and leaned out. But from an energy perspective, it wasn't as beneficial. So I don't do the raw milk too much. But if you want to find out where you can get real raw milk by you, you just go to realmilk.com. That's a pretty good resource, and it can link you up with farmers in your area. Seasonings and condiments, some ways to make healthy stuff taste good. And again, just a list you can print. Alcohol, some recommendations. I usually go with either a water or a soda water, San Pellegrino as a mixer with like a grape or potato based vodka like Ciroc or Chopin. Squeeze a little bit of lemon or lime in there. That blunts the insulin spike. And that's usually my go-to. Some people do all right with dry red wines like Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot. Um, if fat loss is a goal, relegate drinking to one night a week because it does put a lot of extra stress on the liver, which we need for lipolysis, burning fat. Here's stuff to avoid. Won't talk about that because it's no fun. but and then pulled out the phone, didn't manipulate things or rearrange anything. This is what my freezer and fridge looked like a couple days ago. So wanted to give you guys that so you can see you've got some frozen organic berries. You've got down in the lower left, you've got your Kerrygold butter. You've got Udo's oil blend, Bragg apple cider vinegar. What is there? There's some chlorophyll down there. The top, my freezer is a little bit sad. There's just some frozen garlic, some Brain On E3 Live, some JMO and vodka, and yeah. Then there's the fridge. Lots of greens, tons and tons of greens. I've got a little bit of leftover shake there that I didn't finish. Some Penta waters, organic coconut milk, Sunja's kimchi, which it has a lot of uses, not just as a whole food probiotic, but for people that are dealing with like chronic sinusitis. We've used the liquid from Sunja's kimchi, which contains L-sake bacteria. It's one of the only kimchis that contains that bacteria. And after like a nasal rinse, we'll take that, have them dip their pinky in, and rub it on the inside of their nose, and actually repopulate the inside of their nose with that L-sake bacteria, and it clears up chronic sinusitis, along with some other things that we do as part of the protocol. But that's kind of an added bonus benefit. Here's the cabinets. So you've got your organic greens there. I've also got some hearts of palm. You can see above on the top shelf there on the left, the green cans. Those go great in salads. Some organic brown rice, organic lentils, stevia, seasonings, different teas, all that good stuff. Wild caught sardines. Nothing too crazy. Where to buy? I recommend Instacart. It's amazing. I mean, if Instacart is in your area and you're still grocery shopping, stop immediately. It makes it so easy. You can go to Whole Foods, for example. Like, let's say that you were trying to save a few bucks, but you still wanted to eat healthy. You go to Whole Foods, you got to look at what sales they've got going on. You got to traverse the whole store. You go on Instacart, you click produce, then you click sale, and it just pulls up all of the produce that's on sale that day. And you just click what you want, add it to your cart, and have it delivered within 2 hours. And you can do that with everything. It saves your grocery list, so you can just reorder a grocery list and have it delivered every week. It's just so simple. So my go-to is Instacart. In my area, I use Whole Foods and Costco. Trader Joe's, Mariano's, Jewel, US Wellness Meats, which is grasslandbeef.com. I get a ton on Amazon. And then you can get like bison liver from North Star Bison at northstarbison.com. There's some of the grocery delivery apps. I'll let you guys go back and go through that. I mostly just use Instacart. Um, Organic meal delivery, that's going to differ based on your city. Some of the ones in Chicago are Sprig, Radish, and Eat Purely. If you just search organic meal delivery, you'll be able to find some in your area. Healthy recipes, here are some apps that are good with that. I'll let you guys go through those on your own. How much to eat, we'll talk about that a little bit more. We already mentioned therapeutic ketosis, basically allowing your body to run on ketone bodies as opposed to glucose. It's great for mitochondrial dysfunction, brain fog, a lot of health issues. People just do better with it. Diabetics. Here are some of the tools that I use for therapeutic ketosis. And if this is something you guys want, ketosis is a little bit more complicated, so it's usually something I save for one-on-one clients, but maybe we could do a bonus on it or whatever. But here's some of the tools that I use for getting into therapeutic ketosis and bridging the gap between as you transition. There's a little bit of keto brain fog that takes place. There's and some strategic ways you can use these things. Mike, you and I have gone over the keto cocktail and how you can use that. Right now, here's the exogenous ketones I'm using. You go to www.biohacks.com or .proveitnow.com. So PRUVIT now.com. If you want the URLs there, you can check out the ones I'm taking right now. Caloric restriction. Some people experience increased energy. There's a lot of health benefits to restricting your calories by 20 to 30%. Play around with it. If there's digestive issues, you'll probably experience more energy by eating more because your assimilation and the percentage of nutrients that you absorb is lower and compromised. Nutrient density, we've got a lot there. Here's some tools that I use with clients. And then from there, it becomes troubleshooting. And this is where the customization really shines because there are many things that can interfere and suck your energy. So it's not necessarily simple, and it does involve some tinkering for many people and looking at your genes and troubleshooting. So if optimizing digestion, some tools for optimizing digestion. There are many more. Nutritional resources, we've got those. You guys can do that. Start by cleaning the house. Mark the calendar when you're going to start, and then customizing. If you guys want more help and fine tuning, and you really want to take this to that next level, then we'll set up a time to talk and see if it's a fit, and go from there. You can send me a text message or an email.